In computer system, there are many important components such as process, main memory, storage, I/O, privacy, security, etc. And some students may confuse with the terms program and process. Program is a chunk of a binary code stored in the hard disk, so which is passive. Process is a loaded program in the main memory and executed in the CPU, so which is active. For a program, we may have multiple processes in the computer system. For example, we only store one copy of Word program, Microsoft Word program, but we may have multiple Word processes open in the computer system. In order to accomplish the process task, so multiple computer resources are required. The process needs the CPU to execute the program and to do some calculations, and the main memory is needed to store the data and the instructions of the program. And sometimes process need to access some I/O to get something or show something in the computer system. And sometimes process needed to read some data from the file or write some data into the file. So usually at the beginning of running the process, it needs to initialize something such as initialize some arrays or initialize some variables. Since the processes need to occupy some resources in the computer system, so when those processes terminated because they have finished the task or some errors happened, the resources need to be returned back to the computer system and used by other processes later. So nowadays, multiple processes are running in the computer system in parallel manner. So for example, in your computer, you may open a web browser to watch the videos or open a Word to take the notes. And at the same time, the email software may running at the background to receiving the email for you. Since there are multiple processes running in the computer system, so one major task of a computer system is process management. So the computer system needs to provide a good condition or environment for those processes to let them running in an efficient way. So do you still remember that? So we have mentioned the CPU is the most precious resources in the computer system. So even though we have multiple processors in multi-processor architecture, so the number of processes is still much bigger than the number of processors. So in order to make the computer more responsive and efficient, the computer system must schedule those processes in a very appropriate way. And also, when the user newly clicks a new program, so the computer system needed to create a new process and assign system resources to it. So in a very responsive way, right? So when the process finish the task, the computer system needed to delete the process and reclaim all the resources back from the terminated process to keep the computer system in a healthy condition. And when a process is doing some I/O, the computer system needs to temporarily suspend the process and make the CPU available for other processes. So when the process finishes the I/O, the computer system will resume the process and make it finish its tasks. For process synchronization, sometimes multiple processes, they may want to access the same data or resource to do some operations. So in that situation, we need to guarantee no two processes access the shared data at the same time to avoid the inconsistent problem, so which we will talk about that later. And also, the processes, they needed to communicate with each other to accomplish some task. So for example, when you run a Microsoft Office Word process, so there's one front-end process will take care the user's typing and also show the result on the screen, right? And another process on the background will periodically write the result into the hard disk and also make a backup in order to handle the unexpected situation. For example, the software may be crash. So in this situation, the processes are communicated within the same computer. On the other hand, sometimes we need the processes can communicate from different computers. So for example, when you use a web browser to watch some videos, so your web browser process needs to communicate with the video server process, which is located in another location. And the web browser process will be served as a client process. And the client process will send a video request to the video server process. So when the video server process receives this request, it will grab the video data from the server, then send it back to the client process. Then you can watch the video on your web browser. Beside the process, another very important component of a computer system is the main memory. To execute a program and make it running in the CPU as a process. So the corresponding instructions must be loaded into the main memory, and also the corresponding data has to be loaded into the memory as well. So how to do that? Actually, we need to manage the main memory to decide which instructions and the data need to be loaded into the main memory and in which time point, so that we can better optimize the CPU utilization and make the computer can better respond to the users. So for example, suppose the CPU executes an instruction for a process currently. So however, the next instruction is still in the hard disk. So when the current instruction has finished the execution and the CPU need to wait a long time because for the next instruction to be loaded from the hard disk to the main memory. So however, if the main memory has been well managed, the next instruction should be on the main memory already. So you can imagine how fast the process can be. On the other hand, so you guys may know that how large the current operating system can be. Or we can see another example, the video games. So nowadays, the size of a video game is pretty large, tens of gigabytes is very common, so which is much larger than the full size of the main memory. So it is very hard to load the entire game into the main memory. So another very important job of memory management is to decide so which part of the process need to be loaded, and later some part of the process need to be removed from the main memory, and the new part need to be loaded up. So therefore, we can see that the memory management is very important to optimize the CPU utilization and make the computer more responsive to the user.